The universe had always looked at Earth as a simple, insignificant planet, a place with little importance, located on the outer rim of a galaxy far from the center of power. The inhabitants of Earth, humans, were known for their resourcefulness, their ability to adapt, and their fierce will to survive. But they were not seen as anything special by the greater powers of the galaxy. No one took them seriously. For centuries, Earth had been a small, isolated world. Its people were still figuring out how to travel to the stars, while other species had long since mastered space travel. And in the vast, cold stretches of space, Earth was just another dot on the map, a dot that had nothing to offer except its own planet's resources. But that all changed one day. It started with a simple signal. It was weak, almost laughable. A simple message sent from Earth to the galaxy's most powerful species, the Telluri. The Telluri were a fierce, ancient race. They had conquered countless worlds, taking what they wanted and destroying anything that stood in their way. They were known for their unmatched technology, their massive warships, and their ability to defeat any enemy in their path. When the message first arrived, the Telluri leaders laughed. How could a primitive planet like Earth even think they had something to offer? The message read, simply, "Hold on tight. The human warship is about to arrive." The Telluri thought it was a joke. They knew humanity had no advanced technology. They had never seen evidence of humans being anything but weak and backward. It was impossible that the humans could have a warship capable of challenging them. It was a ridiculous thought. But as the days went by, the Telluri began to notice something strange. The message from Earth was not a one-time event. It kept coming. And as it did, it grew stronger. The frequency increased, the signal clearer. Something was happening. The humans were not backing down. Admiral Kor, the leader of the Telluri fleet, sat in his command room, staring at the screens. The message kept repeating, and it filled him with a sense of unease. He had always been confident that the Telluri were the most powerful force in the galaxy. They had crushed countless civilizations without breaking a sweat. But this message, it felt different. It felt like a challenge. And the Telluri never backed down from a challenge. "We should ignore it," Tarn, one of Kor's senior officers, said, standing behind him. "It's just a primitive species. They have nothing that can harm us." Kor turned to look at Tarn, his eyes narrowing. "We're not ignoring it," he said firmly. "Something is happening on Earth. They are not sending these messages just for fun. We need to be prepared." The Telluri fleet began to make preparations. Their warships, massive and heavily armed, were readied for battle. Their weapon systems were checked and rechecked. But as the days passed, and the humans continued sending the same simple message, a sense of unease settled over the Telluri. What if the humans had something more? What if they had somehow developed a weapon capable of threatening the Telluri? Kor gathered his fleet leaders. "We are going to Earth," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "We'll show them that their threats mean nothing. But we will not underestimate them. They've caught our attention, and now we will see what they're capable of." And so, the Telluri fleet set course for Earth. The universe watched as the fleet, the largest and most powerful the galaxy had ever seen, moved toward the small planet on the edge of space. The humans had no idea what they were about to face. They had no idea the might that was coming for them. Meanwhile, back on Earth, no one knew how to prepare for what was coming. General Lee, the leader of the human military forces, had seen the messages from the Telluri. At first, he too thought it was a mistake. The idea that humanity could build anything capable of standing up to the Telluri seemed impossible. But the messages kept coming, each one more urgent than the last. "The warship is coming. Hold on tight." General Lee, along with his top scientists, military advisors, and engineers, spent every waking hour trying to understand how the humans had gotten this far. Where had they gotten the technology to build such a ship? It was clear that something beyond their understanding was happening, and they needed to act fast. There were whispers, rumors, stories about the project that had been underway in secret. No one knew the full details, not even the highest-ranking officials. But in the deepest parts of Earth's underground facilities, a team of engineers had been working for years on something unimaginable, a ship that could rival anything in the galaxy, a ship that could challenge the most powerful species to ever exist. General Lee stared at the blueprints on his desk. The warship was nothing like anything humanity had built before. It was sleek, streamlined, and armed with weaponry that could tear apart entire fleets. The ship was powered by a new type of energy, one that harnessed the core of stars and used their immense power to fuel its engines and weapons. "We don't have much time," General Lee said to his team. "The Teliari will arrive soon, and we need to be ready. This ship is our only chance." The engineers, some of the brightest minds Earth had ever produced, worked tirelessly, making last-minute adjustments. As the warship's engines powered up, a sense of awe and fear filled the air. Could they really do this? Could they stand up to the Teliari? The Teliari had never lost a battle in their history, and Earth had never faced an enemy like this. But they had no choice. The Teliari fleet was getting closer. Admiral Kord's ships were now in the final stages of their journey to Earth. They were not just coming for a fight. They were coming to destroy. And they were confident that nothing could stop them. Nothing could withstand the might of the Teliari warships. As Earth's warship prepared for launch, General Lee gathered his crew. They stood in silence, waiting for the order. They didn't know if they would succeed. They didn't know if their ship was enough to take on the Teliari. But one thing was certain. They were not going to go down without a fight. Humanity had always survived against the odds. They had always found a way. And now, they were going to do it again. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The human warship blasted off from Earth's surface, shooting into the sky at incredible speed. As it broke through the atmosphere, the crew inside felt the immense power of the ship's engines. For the first time in history, a human ship was flying toward the stars, ready to take on an enemy that had never been defeated. The universe was about to witness something it had never seen before. The humans were ready for war. And they were about to show the galaxy that they were not the weak, insignificant species everyone thought they were. As the human warship disappeared into the stars, the Teliari fleet finally reached the edge of Earth's space. Admiral Kord stood at the helm of his flagship, looking out at the planet below. "It's time to put an end to this nonsense," he said. But the humans had already made their move, and the galaxy was about to learn just how powerful humanity could be. The Teliari fleet hung in the cold void of space, the hum of their powerful warships vibrating through the ship's hulls. Admiral Kord stood in the center of his flagship, his sharp eyes scanning the data streams flashing across the control panels. His fleet had reached the outer edges of Earth's system, and they had come to a stop, waiting. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had dared to challenge them. Kord had always believed in the invincibility of his people. The Teliari had been the dominant species in the galaxy for centuries, conquering planet after planet. They were ruthless, powerful, and efficient in everything they did. Their ships were massive and their weapons unparalleled in strength. No one had ever stood up to them and survived. The Teliari had crushed all who dared defy them. And the galaxy knew this well. But Earth was different. For reasons no one understood, the humans had built a ship, one that was unlike anything seen before. Kord had ordered his fleet to hold position, waiting to see what this mysterious ship could do. He had a plan, of course. The Teliari would annihilate the humans as soon as they entered firing range. There was no need to waste time, but the signal from Earth had thrown him off. His fleet's sensors were detecting an anomaly in the system. There was something strange about the human warship's trajectory. They were not following the expected route. Instead, the ship was flying in an unpredictable pattern, weaving in and out of their ship's lines of sight. Kord's brows furrowed as he observed the human ship's movements on the screen. "We've seen nothing like this," one of his officers, Lieutenant Tarn, reported from the side. Their movements aren't based on any known tactics. They're unpredictable, like they're not even using a standard flight algorithm. "This is just a trick," Kor muttered, though doubt crept into his voice. "No ship moves like that unless it's trying to confuse us. Let them try. We'll wipe them out just like we've done with every other species that's dared challenge us." Meanwhile, on Earth's warship, General Lee was preparing for what was undoubtedly the biggest battle in humanity's history. The human crew had gathered in their positions, fully aware that the battle ahead would not be easy. No one had ever faced the Telluri before. The ship's sensors were picking up multiple Telluri ships entering Earth's orbit, but the humans weren't panicking. They had trained for this moment. They had worked for years to build this warship, and now it was time to see if it would live up to its promise. General Lee stood at the front of the command bridge, looking at the tactical displays. His eyes were calm, but inside, his heart raced. He knew the odds were against them. If the Telluri were half as powerful as the stories said, then they didn't stand a chance. But the message from Earth had been clear. Hold on tight. They were ready. "Activate the weapon systems," Lee commanded. His voice was steady, but his hands gripped the edge of his chair. He had no idea if their weapons were even enough to make a dent in the Telluri's massive fleet. But the moment had come. The ship's cannons hummed to life, powered by the energy of stars, a force so immense that it could tear apart entire fleets with a single blast. The humans were about to show the galaxy just how much power they had packed into this ship. No one would underestimate humanity again. Outside, the Telluri fleet waited, their ships positioned in a perfect line across Earth's system. They were waiting for the human ship to make its first move. Kor's fleet had superior firepower, but he had to admit the humans had managed to surprise him so far. "I want them in range," Kor ordered. The Telluri ships began to move toward the human warship, but something was wrong. As they advanced, the human warship continued to dart around unpredictably, moving in ways that defied normal ship movement. The Telluri had never seen anything like it. There was no logic to the human ship's flight pattern. "What are they doing?" Kor asked, his impatience growing. "Why aren't they just attacking?" "They're waiting," Tarn replied, studying the human ship's movements. "They're not acting like any species we've encountered before. They're calculating." Kor stared at the human warship, now directly in front of them, its silhouette dark against the stars. The Telluri fleet had surrounded it. There was no escape. It was time to show Earth just how powerless they truly were. But before he could issue the final command, the human warship fired. The blast of energy was unlike anything the Telluri had ever seen. The human warship released a massive, concentrated beam of energy that lit up the void of space. The beam struck one of the Telluri warships with incredible force. The ship's shields barely held, but the blast pierced through, causing the warship to erupt into a shower of debris. Kor's mouth dropped open. "Impossible," he whispered. They did not just do that. The Telluri officers around him were in shock, staring at their screens. It was no longer a one-sided battle. The humans were fighting back, and they were doing it with weapons that seemed to cut through Telluri shields like butter. But the Telluri were not easily shaken. They had the numbers, the strength, and the weapons to crush any enemy. They immediately returned fire, targeting the human warship with everything they had. The battle began in earnest, the skies above Earth lighting up with explosions as Telluri ships fired relentlessly at the human vessel. Inside the human warship, General Lee's crew scrambled to respond to the barrage. The ship shook under the impact, but the humans held their ground. They had anticipated the Telluri's next move and had already prepared countermeasures. Their ship was tough. The Telluri had no idea how tough. "Activate the secondary shields," Lee ordered, his voice unwavering despite the chaos. "We can take a few hits, but not too many." The human warship's secondary shields flickered to life, absorbing the incoming fire. The Telluri ships were relentless, but they were hitting the human ship at angles that were not as effective as they had hoped. The human warship dodged and weaved, using its superior maneuverability to stay just out of reach of the Telluri's deadly shots. Tarn stood at Kor's side, eyes wide with disbelief. They're not following the patterns we know. Their ship is unpredictable. We can't anticipate their movements. This is unlike anything we've ever seen. Kor clenched his fists. No more games. I'll destroy them myself. He ordered his fleet to launch everything they had at the human warship. The massive beams of energy lit up space as the Telluri unloaded their full firepower. The human ship trembled, but it held firm. General Lee was right. They were not going down without a fight. And then, just when it seemed like the Telluri would overwhelm the human ship, something changed. The human warship shifted course dramatically, moving at an incredible speed towards the largest Telluri ship, the flagship. It was a bold move. If the humans were planning a suicide mission, they were about to take down the Telluri's most powerful ship with them. But General Lee had a different plan. The battle raged on as the human warship, battered but unyielding, maneuvered through the Telluri fleet. The enormous ships of the Telluri, with their gleaming armor and seemingly unstoppable firepower, unleashed wave after wave of devastating blasts. But the human ship, with its unpredictable movements and advanced shields, was like a ghost, slipping through their sights and striking with precision. The Telluri commanders had never faced anything like this before, and the pressure was mounting. Admiral Kor, furious at how things were unfolding, stood at the command center of his flagship. He had thought the humans would be an easy target. They had no advanced technology, no sophisticated battle strategies, or so he had believed. Yet here they were, fighting back with a ferocity that shocked him. His fleet was losing ships, one after another, destroyed by the very species he had once dismissed as primitive. Where is their weakness? Kor growled, staring at the battle unfolding on his screens. His fleet had never been so outmaneuvered. They had superior firepower, and yet the humans kept finding ways to strike back. It was as if their ship were an extension of some great unknown force, their strategies evolving in real time to counter the Telluri's every move. The Telluri fleet continued to surround the human warship, pressing in from all directions, but the humans seemed to know exactly where and when to strike. As the Telluri launched another salvo, the human warship veered at an impossible angle, dodging the incoming shots, and sent a barrage of its own. One Telluri warship exploded in a massive cloud of fire and debris, its shields no match for the human weapons. The humans were making it look effortless. "We must adapt," Kor said, trying to keep his composure. "They're using tactics we've never seen before. There's no pattern to their movements. We need to break their rhythm." Meanwhile, inside the human warship, General Lee was standing at the heart of his command bridge, his mind sharp and calculating. His crew was exhausted, but they were relentless. Their ship had taken hits, severe hits, but they had built it for this. It wasn't just about firepower. It was about something deeper, their will to survive. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't just in the ship's technology or its advanced weaponry. It was in their unity, their determination. They would fight until the last breath. Lee watched the displays as the Telluri fleet converged on them, like wolves closing in on their prey. But Lee had a different plan. He had one card left to play, a card the Telluri never anticipated. "We've got one chance to end this," Lee said calmly, his voice carrying over the bridge. He wasn't sure if it would work. He wasn't sure of anything anymore, but he had no other option. The human warship was still holding up, but it couldn't take much more punishment. If the Telluri continued this assault, they'd destroy it eventually. But there was one thing the Telluri hadn't accounted for: Earth's gravity. It was their planet's greatest asset, a force that had shaped every human on it, and it would be their salvation. Lee turned to his chief engineer, who had been working tirelessly behind the scenes to develop the final part of the warship's energy weapon: activate the gravity pulse generator. Now, the engineer nodded and quickly inputted commands into the ship's system. On the main display, A small icon blinked as the system powered up. Outside, the Telluri fleet closed in on the human warship. They could almost taste victory. But then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. With a violent lurch, the human warship sent out a shockwave, a pulse of immense gravity. The Telluri ships in the immediate vicinity were caught in the pulse's powerful grip. It was like a wave crashing down on them, warping space around them. The Telluri ships that were closest to the human warship began to slow, their systems malfunctioning as the pulse distorted their gravitational fields. "We've destabilized their core systems," the lead officer on the bridge exclaimed, his voice trembling. The Telluri ships, previously so powerful and precise, were now struggling to maintain their position in space. It was as if the very laws of physics were being bent against them. For the first time in the battle, the Telluri were on the back foot. Their superior numbers and firepower had been rendered useless by an unseen force. The human warship, though outmatched in size, had used the one thing no one expected: Earth's gravity itself. The humans had turned their home planet's weakness into their greatest strength. Kor's face turned red with rage as he watched his ships falter. The fleet's commanders were scrambling to regain control, but the gravity pulse had created a chaos that spread quickly through their lines. Some ships were colliding with each other, unable to compensate for the sudden shift in gravitational forces. Others were beginning to break apart. "This cannot be happening," Kor muttered under his breath. "How are they controlling gravity? This shouldn't be possible." Tarn, standing beside him, watched in disbelief as the human warship made another rapid, unpredictable move, now charging directly toward the heart of their fleet. The Telluri were disoriented, their ships struggling to realign themselves as the pulse continued to wreak havoc. The humans had found their weakness and had exploited it with ruthless efficiency. Kor's pride and confidence were being shattered in real time. He had never been faced with an enemy who could not only adapt to their tactics, but use the very forces of nature against him. The humans were no longer the insignificant, primitive species he had once thought them to be. They were a force to be reckoned with. "Destroy them now," Kor barked, trying to regain control. "Launch everything we have. Don't let them get any closer." The Telluri fleet responded with all its remaining firepower, but the human warship was already upon them. With a deafening roar, the human ship unleashed its full arsenal, sending a barrage of energy blasts toward the Telluri flagship. The Telluri ships, still struggling to overcome the effects of the gravity pulse, couldn't respond in time. In moments, the flagship was hit with a direct shot, its shields no match for the human weaponry. The ship's core erupted in a brilliant explosion, and the Telluri flagship was no more. The remaining Telluri ships, in complete disarray, tried to flee, but it was too late. The human warship moved with calculated precision, cutting down ship after ship. The once mighty fleet was now broken and shattered, the enemy they had believed invincible showing them that Earth's humans had more to offer than anyone could have imagined. The battle was over. The Telluri had been defeated. The debris from the Telluri flagship floated in the emptiness of space, remnants of a once proud warship now reduced to smoldering fragments. The human warship had struck with precision, breaking through the Telluri's once impenetrable defenses. The battle, once a sure defeat for Earth, had turned into a resounding victory. But the Telluri, while reeling from the loss of their flagship, were far from finished. They still outnumbered humanity and had the experience of countless campaigns to draw upon. Inside the human warship, General Lee stood silently on the command bridge, watching the battlefield unfold. His crew was worn out, their faces etched with exhaustion, but their eyes gleamed with determination. The victory was theirs, but it had come at a cost. The warship had taken heavy damage, its hull scorched in places, its energy systems strained to their limits. Yet it still held together, a testament to the human spirit. "General, we've dealt a blow to the Telluri, but they're not giving up," Captain Harris reported from the tactical station. "They're regrouping, repositioning their remaining ships for a counterattack. If we don't act fast, they'll come at us again with everything they've got." Lee nodded grimly. "We've got to stay on the offensive. We can't let them recover." He glanced at the screens showing the remaining Telluri fleet. Their ships were regrouping, but they were disoriented. The gravity pulse had caused more damage than the humans had anticipated. The Telluri ships were struggling to regain full functionality, and their once perfect formations were now scattered. "We've created chaos, but they're not finished yet," Lee muttered. The Telluri were relentless. Their pride would not allow them to retreat. "Prepare the final phase of our plan. We need to break their will. One more strike should do it." The crew moved swiftly to execute their orders. The human warship began its final approach toward the heart of the Telluri fleet, carefully calculated and precise. Their trajectory had been set, their weapons calibrated, and their resolve hardening with every passing second. This would be the moment that defined humanity's place in the galaxy. Meanwhile, on the Telluri flagship, Kor's rage was palpable. His hands gripped the railing so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He could not fathom how the humans had pulled this off. It was as if the very fabric of reality itself had been turned against him. Earth's gravity, who would have thought it would become the Telluri's undoing? Tarn, his lieutenant, stood at his side. "Admiral, we've sustained critical damage. Our fleet is in disarray. Our remaining ships are in no condition to engage the human vessel again." Kor's voice was low, almost a growl. "We cannot retreat. We cannot show weakness. The humans have made a mockery of us. We will destroy them, or we will die trying." The Telluri fleet, though shattered, still had powerful weapons at their disposal. Their ships were formidable, their weapons devastating, and Kor would not allow the humans to become the ones who defeated the Telluri. He would go down fighting, even if it meant sacrificing his entire fleet. "We will engage them head-on," Kor declared. "All remaining ships prepare for one final assault. If we die with honor. If we survive, the humans will learn to fear us." The Telluri ships, though battered, rallied around their leader. Their weapons powered up, and they charged toward the human warship, their final assault launched in a desperate bid to turn the tide. The remaining ships moved in unison, their energy cannons charging, ready to unleash everything they had. Back on the human warship, General Lee watched as the Telluri fleet advanced. The final battle was coming. Their plan had been successful so far, but there was no room for error now. The human warship was limping, its systems barely holding together. One more direct hit could cripple them. But Lee wasn't about to give up. Not when the chance to secure humanity's place in the galaxy was within reach. "All hands, brace for impact," Lee commanded. "This is it. We fight to the end." The human warship surged forward, its weapons fully charged and ready for the final clash. The Telluri fleet closed in, firing everything they had. Massive beams of energy shot out from the Telluri ships, slamming into the human vessel. The warship shook violently under the barrage. The hull groaned, creaking under the pressure. But it held. Despite everything, it held. Inside the warship, the crew was working with desperate urgency. The weapon systems flared to life, firing relentlessly at the oncoming Telluri ships. The human warship dodged, rolling and weaving with expert precision, narrowly avoiding devastating blasts as it closed the distance. Then, as if on cue, the humans launched their final strike. With all of the remaining power in the warship's core, they unleashed the full force of their weapons. The blast was unlike anything seen before, a concentrated pulse of energy, amplified by the human warship's gravity manipulation technology. The energy surged out in a colossal wave, tearing through the Telluri fleet. Ships exploded, their shields unable to hold against the intensity of the blast. The once mighty Telluri fleet was torn apart, scattered in the vastness of space. Kor watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated before his eyes. The humans had done it. They had turned the Telluri's might against them. The Telluri had never known defeat like this. The last of the Telluri ships, The ones that had managed to survive the blast tried to flee, but it was too late. The human warship, though battered and scarred, was still standing. And now, the Telieri knew, humanity had proven itself. Earth was not to be underestimated. General Lee stood on the command bridge, looking at the devastation on the screen. The battle was over. The Telieri had been vanquished. But the cost had been great. The warship was in critical condition, and many lives had been lost. Still, Lee couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. Humanity had faced an impossible enemy and had emerged victorious. "We've done it," Captain Harris said quietly, almost in disbelief. "Yes," General Lee replied, his voice low but filled with conviction. "We've done it." Humanity had proven its worth in the most brutal way possible. And now, the galaxy would remember Earth. No longer would the universe laugh at humanity. From this day forward, the galaxy would know that Earth was not a planet to be taken lightly. The human warship had arrived. And it was here to stay. The silence that followed the final explosion was deafening. For a moment, it was as if the entire galaxy had stopped to witness the aftermath of humanity's victory. The Telieri fleet was no more, its once proud warships drifting as wreckage in the cold expanse of space. Only a handful of Telieri ships remained, scattering in all directions, their escape made desperate by the overwhelming force of the human counterattack. General Lee stood at the command bridge, his hands resting on the console. His body was weary, his eyes bloodshot, but he refused to show weakness. This battle, this war, had cost humanity everything. But in the end, they had won. They had shown the galaxy that no matter how vast or powerful the enemies were, humanity would rise. The world they had fought for, their home on Earth, had survived. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. "Status report," Lee said, his voice quiet but steady. Captain Harris, exhausted yet resolute, glanced at the display. "We've lost over 30% of our fleet, General, but the remaining ships are intact. The Telieri forces are scattered and in retreat. Their communications have been disrupted. They're no longer a threat." Lee nodded slowly, taking in the grim news. The victory was bittersweet. Many lives had been lost in the battle, brave men and women who had fought to protect Earth's future. The human warship, battered and scarred, had done its job, but it wasn't without sacrifice. "Prepare for recovery operations. I want all the surviving ships back in formation. We'll need to make repairs and assess the damage." The crew worked diligently, but their faces were painted with exhaustion. The battle had taken a toll on everyone, and many knew it would take months, if not years, to rebuild what had been lost. Yet there was no doubt in anyone's mind. Humanity had emerged victorious, and their message was clear to anyone who would listen. Meanwhile, on the remnants of the Telieri flagship, Admiral Kor had retreated to a remote sector of space. His once proud fleet had been shattered, reduced to a scattering of survivors. His mind raced as he processed the defeat. He had underestimated humanity, an error that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He had thought the humans weak, primitive, no match for the might of the Telieri. But now he knew the truth. Earth's people were not to be dismissed. "We were wrong," Kor said, standing in front of the holographic display of the battlefield. "The humans are not what we believe them to be. They are stronger than we could have imagined." His Lieutenant Tarn stood silently by his side. "What do we do now, Admiral?" "The humans are not finished. They will rebuild. They will come for us again." Kor's eyes narrowed as he considered their next move. "We retreat for now, but this is not over. We will return, and we will defeat them. The humans are formidable, but they will fall. No one can stand against the might of the Telieri forever." Tarn nodded but said nothing. He knew his commander's pride would never allow him to accept defeat. Kor's words, filled with arrogance and rage, would echo through the Telieri ranks, urging them to regroup and plan for the next war.